Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Imagine a Movie podcast, a podcast where we watch a movie and then we talk about it. My name's David, and no dipshit, man.
My name's Sam, and my God, man, do you know what? Do you want an acute case on your hands? This woman has immediate postprandial upper abdominal distension. Now get out of the way.
I forgot which one of us was third when Joe.
Oh no, because this is Ross then Joe.
You go, Ross.
I'll go. And I'm Ross, completely and utterly disgusted with the flagrant floundering of the rules that Starfleet show for time travel.
And I'm Joe, making a special guest appearance, and we are looking for nuclear vessels.
That's a great fake Russian accent. That's what that is.
As good as Chekhov's in this film.
Now that we've touched on it, I was like, what is the voice he's doing here? And what accent is someone going Wessels?
Right. Well, let's.
I mean, surely Russian is like the one accent that really pronounces the V's like, oh yes, vessels. It's. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Not in the '60s, Ross. But before we get into this, because there is a conversation to be had here, we watched 1986's A Voyage Home. And just to inform our listeners, who will very quickly get the point here, Ross has never watched any Star Trek.
No, that's not entirely correct, Dave.
I'm not counting the new films.
No, I'm on about the ones with Picard, Patrick Stewart. I did watch that one with the Borg, which I liked.
Oh, the sexy Borg Queen. That's a weird one.
There we go. Yeah. So I think me, Dave, and Joe, who quite recently within lockdown in 2020 has got into Star Trek.
Madness has taken us all. Joe,
it has. I think we were all judging you, Ross, expecting you to be like just completely just flabbergasted by this movie. And to be very fair to you, you would not be wrong in that assessment of, I'm sorry, Wales? What? We mentioned we're doing Voyage Home, which is Star Trek 4. And let's do a little plot summary, and then I think what we should do is let Ross just have the floor for a moment as a non Star Trek fan, just to kind of warm up a little bit.
Where does he start there? Where does he even begin?
In this film, so to save Earth from an alien probe, James T. Kirk and his fugitive crew go back in time to San Francisco in 1986 to retrieve the only beings who can communicate with the probe, humpback whales. What more could you want from a movie?
Yeah, reading the description, I was reading it on Sky, and before I was able to press play, you see a short cut of the synopsis, and it said, they travel back in time to rescue 2 humpback whales, and I was like, I'm sure that's a typo. I am sure I can't be reading that right. Whales. Okay, let's see where this goes. And wow, it's a stretch. I said to you before, I might be getting ahead of myself here, Sam, but I said to you before, it feels like just an extended episode, something that's split into two, like a 2-part. And now, the thrilling conclusion to A Voyage Home. It's, I was entertained by bits. There's one bit in particular, I was like, Sam's a goddamn hypocrite. and I'll get into that.
I'm excited for Paniccast this week's episode.
Well, I'll get to that point when it's time, when the moment arises.
Such a tease.
I was going to say, just going to tease that in there for you guys. Yeah.
How do we want to tackle this? I think this is going to go through the plot because there are individual points in this movie.
Before we do that, Sam, I thought for Ross's benefit, we'd maybe put this film in the context of Star Trek as a series. Because obviously Ross, quite forgivably, being a man who is, only 45 years old, has not lived through Star Trek in the 60s. Now...
you're brave when you're 70 miles away, aren't you?
I fucking am when we're locked down for COVID, Ross. You get slapped with a £200 fine is icing on the cake of me calling you old.
Worth it, Ross. Worth it. Yeah, it's worth every penny.
But Star Trek in the 60s, obviously, you'll be familiar with through cultural osmosis, Ross. But it ran for 2 seasons, got cancelled, was resurrected through a letter writing campaign, and then got cancelled again. And the films were like, it's funny how you sort of looked at this as an extended episode, because the films kind of are that. The cast were all famous enough and successful enough, especially Nimoy and Shatner. Like, they had enough pull that even if Paramount, who I believe had the rights at the time, could have afforded to, like, you know, could have afforded to get them back for another series of the TV show. Like, there's just no way the whole cast could have committed to it. So instead, they made 6 movies between what's the first one, 78?
I think something so. Like that.
Yeah. Between 78 and I think 89 or 90, the last one, 91, sorry, I think the last one was. And they made these 6 movies, and they were like, some of them are dog shit, but they were like this continuation of the series, and like I suspect reusing a lot of like script ideas they'd had in the mid to late 60s about let's do X, Y, and Z, you know, and so that's kind of the reason this film is what this film is. But being the fourth one, it's actually probably one of the better ones.
It's probably my favourite one. However, Wrath of Khan is definitely a better film. And I would say that this one probably is the one that kind of is more for the fans than any of them. Because the plot isn't good at all. It's basically just there to show you kind of Spock and Kirk's kind of relationship more than anything else, and that's kind of all it is, really.
It's Star Trek, and everyone's had a couple of drinks. And that's what this movie is to me. It's like, we're all good, we're fine, everyone's having... Whereas I think the other ones, everyone's relaxed. It's also cheap as shit to make, because they just walk around San Francisco filming normal things, and you know, the sets in this are fairly minimal, and they reused a heck of a lot of them from the other films. So it is like Star Trek After Dark. You know, everyone's just chilled out a little bit. Let's not worry about too much about things like plot and characters and story. Let's just get into the crew have to do this, and how we're going to get them there to the end of that process.
I felt that, Sam, in terms of like production value, and is that let's not worry about it. Yeah, that came through. If I'm honest,
I was complimenting the movie for that. I don't feel you're doing the same thing, Ross.
I was not. No, but without being too harsh, because you know it's a movie from 40 odd years ago. But Dave mentioned as well, it's sort of like a continuation of that universe. And I just think when you're doing it for a movie, that sort of value, such as production and plot, you do need to up your game somewhat on that. And this feels, like I said, like it's you know, it's part of a series. You know, it's a 2-part episode sort of thing.
The biggest problem, as far as I can see it, and this leads us nicely into talking about the first bit of the plot. The biggest problem with this movie, Ross, is exactly what you've said, is that no time elapses really from the end of the last movie to this movie. Like, and so we spend the first half an hour, and I'm sure you noticed this, and we're like, what the fuck is going on? The first half an hour of this movie is actually like the last half an hour of the last movie, because by the way, just briefly, before it gets lost in time, the big spaceship explosion at the beginning of this movie is reused footage wholesale from the last movie. They didn't shoot anything new, they just clipped it and put it in this one.
Before you go on to your larger point, Dave, and me as well, also, when you see the ship exploding, who's recording? That was one I was like, wait a second.
Don't come here with your questions.
Get a nice shot.
And your logic. It is. To be fair, like if you're watching in the cinema in 1986, like I think there's a presumption that you've seen the other ones, and there was quite a big story arc that took place from the first movie, Khan, Search for Spock, and then here we are at Voyage Home. So, like, I'm all for a movie should make sense for anyone who hasn't seen all the others.
Paper.
Oh my god, he's writing things down. But at the same time,
he's learning.
Like, it does. I don't think it's too unfair to expect that you kind of know who these characters are, understand the dynamic, and kind of roughly have a good idea. But yeah, it is the first half an hour of this movie is. I mean, I don't find it boring because I enjoy all of the stuff, but I can really, from your point of view, Ross,
I found like it boring.
It was dope.
It's not as good because they're not like, you know, get to the money. That's what you need to do, is get them time traveling, get them back on Earth, and then that's where the fun begins.
So it's interesting, Sam, This is the point that I
There
had
it
to.
is.
Yeah, just the one two
Grace.
coming out.
I'm so excited for this to be underwhelming.
Well, most likely.
Joe, should we do Star Trek Shaky Cam?
I mean,
we're in a battle.
For me, it's going to be really satisfying. For you guys, like, oh, really, Ross? But no, what I was going to say is like you yourself said, Sam. It's like 30 minutes from the previous movie, and there's all these. You're expected to know the characters, and I just think it's a bit rich. Where you're like, well, yeah, you're going to have to know that when we've done movies in the past. The most recent one is Justice League, and you start off saying, "Oh, Superman's dead. We're just supposed to get that R-rated." Like, yeah, if you watch the movies beforehand, but somehow, shut the fuck up for 1 second.
Right, okay.
Somehow, Star Trek does it, and oh yeah, it's okay. You got to know the characters in it. Yeah, that's my standard English accent,
by the way.
That's
So effective.
it's a strange accent.
I accepted it. I accepted it because I know I'm watching Star Trek 4. The Quest for Peace or some bullshit.
Ross.
Quest for
Peace.
That's a Superman movie. Actually,
what I did say, Ross, is that I think there's the difference is that they're expecting.
Listen to Sam now make excuses. Go ahead, Sam.
No,
sorry.
they're expecting in 1986 for people to have sinned because it's a Star Trek, because it is relatively niche. Like, this isn't a massive blockbuster movie.
And comics aren't, but yeah.
No, I'm sorry, but comic movies are the principal fucking media of our time. Like, there's nothing else that exists outside of that. So I just think there's a little bit of difference, because this is for nerds in a different way than nerds that are around now. That's my distinction.
I would have to side with Ross on this one, Sam.
Oh, fine, fuck you both.
Like, a movie's I get what you're saying, but at the same time, a movie's a movie. Like, yes, if somebody can't walk in off the streets and watch your movie, that happens a lot, and that is fair. It is a problem, but I think it's a problem with both of these. I don't think I don't think it's more excusable in this Star Trek movie than it is in the Justice League movie. I think it's the same.
Yeah, I agree. It's not 4 hours long. It's not 4 hours long, to be fair.
There is that. There is that.
Let's.
This all goes back to the point that this is a film for the fans. So that's why they expect you to have watched it, because they're like, if you don't watch Star Trek, you shouldn't be watching this.
Let me be clear. I'm not attacking Star Trek. I'm attacking.
I know. I'm making the point. Yeah, that's fine.
And we fully support
I'm all for that. Yeah.
I'm Ross Griffith, and I support this message.
Let's get into this.
Let's talk about this first section, because I think it's going to be a fairly short conversation. I am talking pre-time travel, because there's some stuff going on that I'm sure Ross wants to get into. There's some bureaucratic stuff that's nonsense.
This is my bread and butter.
Like, let's start with Joe, because he's probably said the least so far about this first section. Joe, anything you want to talk about? I'm talking like this nonsensy half hour that should be 15 minutes.
Yeah, it's not overly exciting. Even having watched these films fairly recently, like, I kind of had to remind myself what happened in Search for Spock to kind of remember what was going on in this first 30 minutes. The most noteworthy thing that I noticed was that Brock Peters is in one of the scenes, who plays Joseph Sisko, Ben Sisko's father, in DS9. So
these are all names and words you don't understand, Ross, but a character from the series.
I'm
who
filling
plays
in the blanks in my mind.
That's cool. Yeah,
I think it's Admiral Cunningham he plays.
We also get a female captain in this opening for the first time in Star Trek, I think. There'd later be a series of the female captain, but up until now, it'd been the 60s, so ain't no women in my captain's chair.
There's a person of colour female captain as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wasn't Star Trek the first interracial?
Kiss.
Uhura, wasn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who, boy, I wish they'd written a character up for that character in this movie, or even some lines.
But we do get that kind of stuff. The stuff on Vulcan, which is a little bit kind of boring. But once they get going, and this is also cut in with the stuff around what's happening on Earth. Now, I love this. Like, there's a mysterious probe, and then we get to see like the effects of that. And for me, after it does take a long time, but once we get to the point where they're like, the probe is ionizing the atmosphere, like the oceans are being vaporized. Like, this is for me, this is like beautiful peak Star Trek. There's something going on. No one knows why, and we get we get to basically figure it out along with everyone else. And I think I do like once we get past the Vulcan stuff and basically like the end of the last movie, this is fun. This is really good Star Trek.
I can't tell it. Dave's frozen.
Can I just say, I was waiting to speak. Can I just say that the design of this probe is shockingly unthreatening. It looks like it's a black tube with a ball on a string on it.
I mean,
and apparently this was the second pass. This was their second attempt to make this probe look like something.
It's ILM as well. It's Industrial Light and Magic. So there's like there is a lot of thought going to this, and from the trivia, you do see them saying like, well, let's add more texture to it, and I think it's supposed to be kind of non-threatening though.
Maybe it looked better on a screen in 1986 than it does.
I was going to say,
I think now.
I think you could argue it's an intentional design thing where there's so little sort of identifying features. You go, oh well, that's obviously a weapon system, just because it's so seemingly plain. But like Sam mentioned, I was going to say earlier, you can, when you get some close-up shots, you see it's like texture. It looks like old metal. But I think, to be fair to them, there was a fair bit of like thought behind it. I mean, that little that little testicle that hangs down. I mean, that was
lifeline.
Yeah,
it was like standing over a mirror.
It does. I don't mind it so much. I don't mind, and it's also like it's menacing in that like it's very 2001, isn't it? Space Odyssey.
Yeah. And there's some of that throughout the other Star Trek original series,
like the monolith and stuff. I do think it's good. But what I like though is I like that it's totally messing things up, and that there's that great moment where the president of the Earth sends out this signal basically saying, "Don't come here." Like I just love the selflessness
Trump did the
of
same
that.
thing a couple of years ago, Sam.
Yeah, he's not saying help us. He's saying don't come to Earth because you're going to get fucked if you come here. Like I think there's a really cool. I like the message of that, and I like the way that it's done.
Their sense of panic when they get the message back from Kirk saying he's going back in time. Get him back on screen! Get him back on screen!
You think they're like shaking their heads, going, "Right, the Earth is blowing up, but this fucking guy has got his cock in his hand again."
I would like to see a scene where it's like, Mr. President, we've got a message from one of the admirals. Oh, who is it? Kirk. Oh shit! Fuck! Not Kirk. What's he saying
with this guy?
What's he going to do? Go back in time or something? Funnily enough, no.
Yeah, this is the 4th time that Kirk and the gang go back in time. Before we move on to the actual time travel, I do have two things I want to mention first.
Okay, go on.
Now, firstly, you mentioned ILM, Sam. I think there's some really excellent matte paintings in the first bit of this movie, especially like when we see the Klingon warbird. It's the same one used twice, but I really love. I'm a stickler for a matte painting. I think it's a really like lost art in a lot of movies.
So many films that we love, Star Wars and Star Trek. Like so many of them utilize matte paintings, and we didn't even know it. It's not something you notice. It's like designed to not be noticed that you.
But once you know to look for it, you can kind of tell because it looks better than like a picture would look.
It's beautiful.
For Joe's benefit, guys, why don't you explain what a matte painting is?
So this is instead of like a digitally created background, they literally somebody has painted what the Klingon warbird, and then have like you can maybe have a ship or someone walking across the front of it, which would be blue screened. So this is a physical painting, and these things are often quite big as well. So you see a lot of them in film like Alien as well. They utilize them quite a lot. So
like establishing like landscape shots where it's obviously like if they can't get a camera in a plane and take a video of an actual landscape for whatever reason, they will they will paint it. But it's quite impressive.
But that's correct. Well, did you get that, Joe?
Yeah, well done.
We're on video, Ross, so we can all tell that you're paying no attention.
He's writing things down, but
I'm scoring you.
Right, but the thing is that the other thing with this is that Spock figures out that this ship is making a noise. It's transmitting this signal, and that's the bit that again, like watching this as a kid or thereabouts, like. The moment when they figure out that this signal, and they're like, I think Uhura is like putting it through some kind of modulator or whatever else to figure out. Physical buttons.
That is her entire job throughout the entire original series. She
warning, processing.
That's it,
Captain.
That's all she does.
Processing.
Yeah. Tragically underutilized, Michelle Nichols, but it's that point where they go and they're like messing around and the noise is changing, and then they finally change the frequency or whatever it is modulation they're using, and they get it on the whale song, and I have a distinct memory of going, oh my god, it's whales, like just that whole I just love that.
No, not that Wales, audience, the ones in the sea.
Yeah, not the country which no one's heard of. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna. I had the same reaction, Sam. You know, when you say, "Oh my god," I actually went, "Oh my god, it's Wales."
Yes, that's the other way to take it. That's the other way to take it. Yeah.
More on the Ross side of like Wales.
Oh, you guys.
I'm sorry, Sam, but like, you can pal up to Gene Roddenberry all you like, but it's fine. I think they do a really good job with this MacGuffin. But when it's Wales and somehow the boy who's literally from another planet knows about humpback whales, you're like, could we not have had one of the other characters who grew up on the planet these animals are from know about them? Because
that's the point. Spock knows. I mean, he can recite Hamlet, for Christ's sake, and that is one of my. I just love that. Like, I think McCoy says something, and he just says
It's Bones. Yeah, Bones.
Yeah, he says
Bones says angels and ministers of grace defenders, and he turns to him and goes Hamlet Act 1 scene whatever.
Scene 4, and it's like
that's the back of the ship. Yeah,
nerd. But it is. I know. I think it works perfectly because you see Spock and you see his ability to like. He just obviously is very learned and knows all this stuff. But I'm going to defend the whales here because I think number one, it's a great little, like piece of like surprise. Like it's so like whether or not you find it negative, it's something different. It's something really different. And then actually, what they managed to do is thread that through the rest of the movie incredibly well. Like the whales are a core part of every single piece of this film, and I think it's a great device that anchors you from the future into the present day when whaling was a bit more of an issue in the mid-80s as well. So I think it's a great piece of writing. I can
get it. I mean, there's some interesting choices we'll get into. My other bit of trivia corner that I'm going to do before we move on to our time travel bit is, and Ross, you may as well go to sleep here. So we see the character, is it Savick, the lieutenant on Vulcan, and they say goodbye and she fucks off. Now Savick was a character in the last movie and in the first one, and apparently this was deleted, thank Christ. There was going to be a plot where she stays behind on Vulcan because she's pregnant with Spock's baby, which is like not actually like massively like, oh my god, it's until you consider the fact that in the last movie, Ross, just try and follow me here because we're going to get a little crazy. Vulcans, unlike humans, have a mating season where they go mad for mating. Literally mad, like superhuman strength to fuck.
There's an episode of the original series designed exactly for that. Where
there's an episode of every single series.
There's an episode of every season where
just
like Vulcans turn into sweaty sexual predators. Anyway, so that established Kul Ponfar. In the last movie, Savick basically what's the word the trivia I read said? Like, in order to treat Spock's Ponfar, she fucks him. That's why she's pregnant. Not because they're in a relationship or anything, but because to stop him raping her, she had sex with him. And obviously, somebody clever sat down and said, I know it's Star Trek. I know this is in the lore, but can we get this problematic scene out of our movie?
Yeah.
It's one of those 1980s executives.
It's one of those 60s holdovers of like, there's a thing that we invented in the lore in the 60s. And then every single season of Star Trek and movies, they have to go, oh, fucking right. It's every 7 years, it's Ponfar, so we need to do something, like clockwork. It's very.
I love the look on Ross's face.
Go on, Ross.
We are not making any of this up.
Go on, Ross. Like, I've got everything to add to this. Rape
I
fest.
say, like, at the end of this, what we should do is just release a video, just like no sound, just Ross's face for the entire thing.
Oh god, yeah, that'd be great.
Reactions.
Yeah,
just a compilation of like Ponfa being explained to me.
we can do that. Look. We can just focus on Ross entirely. It's very exciting. So
anyway, I just want to it now before we move back into the past because we are cutting this starting section off like a dead limb.
Yeah, I need to ask one question because this is where I turned off. But like Sam said, oh my god, it's Wales. I went, oh my god, it's Wales. I missed how this is pulled together. Like they're sending a probe to Wales. Why?
Because the whales. So in the mid 80s,
you try and explain this like
it's very simple.
Sam.
It's very simple. In the mid 80s. In the mid 80s, like a bit earlier than that, actually, a bit in the 70s,
In
Greenpeace
the 80s,
had been on.
we had Cold War drama.
Yeah. In the 70s, there was a real movement like to save the whales, Greenpeace, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So this film's kind of reacting to that in the contemporary times of 1986, when there was a threat against whales. And so this film's saying the whales have been wiped out by human beings.
Yes, yeah, I got that far.
So the probe, whales are aliens who have been planted here on Earth hundreds, thousands, or millions of years ago. The whales are the probe has been sent by wherever the whales come from because there's no whale song left. That's what they're doing. They're going, we can't hear the whale song from the whales in the ocean, so we're going to send this probe from the whale planet, and where they have their whale parliament.
Can I just make a point?
Whale army.
Sam is pulling all of this out of his arse. The movie does not state any of this. All we know,
the movie does.
Let's hang on.
All we know is the probe is there to talk to the whales. Either the whales are a sentient species who have previously had contact with whoever this probe is from. Not once do we get the probe Senate put forward. That's a Sam headcanon thing.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. The whale parliament thing is a maybe. Okay, let's put a pin in that.
No whale space NASA. That isn't a thing.
I wish somebody had just like jumped into like watching this about like a minute back. Whales and parliaments and probes.
I wish we had any listeners or watchers, Joe. To be honest, but
go on, Ross. Go on.
So I actually pulled that same theory that you had, Sam, because I thought I missed the explanation somehow. Somewhere I thought I missed it. And so the whales are gone and they sent this probe. However, here's the problem I have with that. Because, like you described earlier, Sam, the probe they send is vaporizing Earth's seawater. Surely when they went there in the first place, they would know, like, if they're probing the area or they're dropping whales off, we better not do that because we'll vaporize the water. But somehow they forget that important fact. We're like, hey, there's no whales. Send that thing that boils the thing they live in.
I can only presume, and we are 27 minutes of this, and we're in the first like 25 minutes.
Well, it's our fucking podcast, let's do it.
Strap in for 3 hours. I presume what they're doing is they're looking for the whales by vaporizing all the water to find them. That's what I presume. But I feel, if there's no water. Anyway, I feel like. I feel like me interpreting Star Trek lore is probably not good.
No, Sam, you've had too many beers to be quite as coherent about.
Absolutely, but what I am coherent about, Dave, is this is a good example of movie time travel. Now, I like consistent time travel, like kind of systems, I guess. Well, there's just being able to actually understand how the time travel works. Now, in this, we get like the usual thing in Star Trek, which is just go really, really fast, and then we'll figure it out. Like there isn't any.
We should say somewhat not plausible as such, but theoretical. Like if we're ever to time travel, traveling at the speed of light is how we would do it. However, it only works going forwards, and it's more like a time dilation thing.
Which is a massive problem with most time travel.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
no one ever time travels to the 2800s for budgetary reasons in their movie.
And when they because if they did, like they'd be going because they're going at a certain speed. the world behind them on Earth is stuck in the it isn't able to go that fast, so it's very complicated. But in this, we do see Spock like trying to. He does say, "I'm going to determine the calculations to figure it out." But it's I think they go warp 9.9, and we do get some great acting from George Takei saying, warp 8, warp 9. Warp 9.1, 9.2. I do love that moment, and then they slingshot around the sun, and then we're in 1986.
Sam's in love with George Takei's Sesame Street audition tape.
It is.
I'm confused.
Warp 9.
Your setup there, Sam, does not seem to match what the words you just said. I absolutely love a consistent time travel thing. Well, they go really fast, and then they go around the sun, and they go back in time.
Yeah,
I'm like,
but I think what you're missing, Dave. What you're missing, Dave,
on what you're saying
is this is Star Trek rules. This is what you're missing because no, because it is a thing. Like we do get Star Trek where they basically warp drive is complete nonsense. There isn't any real reasoning behind how it works. I think basically they move space around the ships. I think is how they.
Yeah. And there's magic crystals. There's magic crystals that power them. Let's be honest.
Let's not get into the physics of how space travel works in this sci-fi show.
But
please.
I do agree.
Have an aneurysm.
I do agree that this is. I enjoy it. Right.
We talked about whales.
I do enjoy it, but I do agree it is total nonsense. And how they're so accurately able to get to 1986, literally 2 days before these whales are moved from San Francisco. That seems like a margin that you'd struggle to achieve, but deliberately. But there we go.
It also seems strange because they get to the past, so we have a time travel scene, and it's very there's giant heads floating in the sky. It's fine. I'm not going to harp on about that. They get back in time, and they ascertain that they're in the late 20th century because of the pollution in the atmosphere. Now, if they've got sensors that can read things like the pollution levels of the entire Earth's atmosphere, surely they can just scan for the whales. They can be if this probe can scan for whale song, can we not scan for whale song? And I get that it's just because we want feet on the ground and we've got 10 days to film in San Francisco when we need to be on the streets in San Francisco, but still.
Also, could they not just get a recording of whale song? Do they actually need the whales themselves?
Shut up, Joe.
You weren't paying attention. You weren't paying attention to the fucking film, Joe.
Probably not.
They said they can. They can give the noises, but it'll just be gibberish, Joe. Spock explained this clearly. If you come out with that sort of shite again, Joe, I don't know.
I thought Ross hadn't seen Star Trek before, and you're becoming a little bit too invested.
He's about to airlock Joe. I'll tell you.
Yours in session, guys. All right, I came prepared. Okay.
I did love, again, just from a point of nerdy. I've always wondered how the sensors work in Star Trek. How do they know?
It's very simple, Sam. I know exactly how they work. They are as good or as bad as the situation.
As the situation calls for. Yep.
Script says either we'll scan it and it'll work, or no, we can't use scanners because
scanner's not working. Yeah,
I did like the way that they use the pollution in the atmosphere to determine I think again it's a nice little
stab at how shitty our time is.
Yeah, the world's pretty fucked up, and we're gonna point at that, which is in the grand tradition of Star Trek, the ability to point back and say the way we're doing things isn't good. We need to be better as a human, as humanity. I think that's a nice Star Trek theme that they've got going on.
Yeah. So we go back in time, and here's a scene I think Ross might have some thoughts on. We get quite a nice Terminator-y scene when they land in the park with the garbage men, and it really reminded me of that first Terminator film, and I was a bit upset that I didn't get to see Arnie's naked ass really. It was a real shame because all you get is fat middle-aged William Shatner.
Everyone remember where we parked?
And you know what? I hate to admit it. I quite like that line. I was like, oh, that's very good. Well done.
The humour in this is quite well timed, and the reason it's funny is because every character who's making the jokes, they're not making a joke. We're finding it funny, but they're just going about their business. My favourite probably joke in the film is when Kirk and Spock are going to go and look for the whales, and he tells the rest of them to like stand away from them, and just you all go in separate directions. And he turns around and they're all just like
spread out
in the same 4-foot space they were in before.
It's kind of pointing out that these guys, all these people are giant nerds because they're in Starfleet.
They're so out of space. They're so out of place. They have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, so I got a real Beverly Hills Cop vibe when they're in San Francisco, which there's a bit of trivia, but I think we'll maybe save that till the end of the episode. But like you get some real sort of like 80s new wave music going on as they're like, this is a grubby San Francisco as well. This is a proper like downtown Detroit, San Francisco.
There wasn't a lot of money or budget spent on the sort of the booking the nice places in San Francisco. You got a couple of shots of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's your lot. Move on now to the dump downtown.
Well, they had about 10 days to shoot it, and a lot of it was on location, which is, you won't know, Ross, but quite out of the ordinary for a Star Trek film, because a lot of them, obviously, because they take place
it's on a set.
It's on a set. It's part of the reason that I think I enjoy this film quite as much as I do, is because it feels a lot more real and grounded, because like they're in an actual place with actual people.
Yes.
You feel more connected and kind of, they're like, oh, look, they're eating Italian. That's what we do.
There were a couple of scenes where it was, I think, Uhura and is it Chekhov, the Russian dude,
Chekhov.
And they're looking for directions to the naval base, and
yes,
Chekhov's
we're looking for
accent,
the nuclear vessels.
Yeah, the West.
Apparently,
that
all of the police are on holiday this entire week. I'm sorry, in 1986, with like actual Cold War shit going on, this guy is in Guantanamo Bay before the day is out.
I'm looking for nuclear missiles. Just deadpan stare. Like, this cop did not give a shit. It was his last day before retirement, and he was done. Could not give one iota of a shit. But what I was going to say was, when Uhura and Chekhov were like approaching, like members of the public, it's sort of, you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, but it sort of felt like these were people, like they weren't extras, they weren't actors, they were approaching real people, and they were just I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they were like, I think it said that they were people who knew what was going on, but it was from like a hidden camera point of view, so I think they were just walking around. They
were extras, but they weren't like actors, I should say.
They weren't given lines. Yeah. There is one funny story about, I think the one of the women who says, oh, it's over in Almadena or whatever it is,
Almalida or something like that.
Yeah. So I think she had been like drafted onto the thing, and then actually got a parking ticket around it. So she was like, "Can I have a job? Like, I'll say a line for you to pay for the parking ticket," which is a funny story. But there are lots of moments of that, like them in San Francisco. It's like a great. It's like it's the type of thing that if you're not into Star Trek, you don't need
to be.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But it's easy to miss like how just fun that is, because you don't see them. The bit where they're handing out money, or he gets paid. I've got this watch, or the whatever it is.
Spectacles.
That's a funny time paradox whereby Bones buys those glasses for him from that same shop in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Kirk sells them in the past, and therefore the guy has them. So then Bones buys them 300 years later from the same place.
Let's have an entire section
on that, don't they? Because Spock says to him, "Didn't Bones buy you those?
Weren't they a gift?" And that's the beautiful thing, Spock. They will be again.
Hold it, Ross. Let's have a section at the end where we can.
I'm just making some notes. Sam.
We can wrap up all the time travel stuff, because there's a lot. But what I liked is he goes and he says, "I'll give you $100 for them." And they go, "Is that a lot?" And then he's handing out $100 bills, because they don't use money. Like, and there's all these. Don't spend it all at once, and they must have about $25 each, which is a lot, more money in 1986 than it is now. But still, it's not going to get you that far.
They don't pay for anything apart from like they don't manage to get on the bus, so you never actually see any of these people spend any money. Yeah. So there's lots of moments of them in just doing normal things in 1986 San Francisco, which I think is
is just really satisfying and funny in the same way that in, say, Back to the Future, him going to the dance or whatever else is just engaging and fun because as the audience what's actually happening, and that kind of fish out.
I would say though, Sam, that I think, contrary to what you said maybe a little bit, I think that maybe is the easiest bit. I mean, Ross, obviously you're the guy we'll ask in a second, but I think that's the easiest bit to enjoy, even if you're not a Star Trek fan, because obviously I'll hand over to Ross now, but it's very, it's very tropey of time travel.
Yeah.
Which part are we referring specifically to?
So when they get to San Francisco and they're kind of like, they don't know how things work,
Yeah, they're being idiots.
Did that translate? Did you understand what they were getting at there?
Oh, absolutely. No, I don't think you need to be a massive Star Trek fan to sort of appreciate. I mean, it's that age-old thing. Like we've covered, I don't know how many times in the podcast, but that classic fish out of water thing. And I will take a bit of objection comparing it to Back to the Future, because say what you will about him, Doc Brown knew how to not fuck with the past, which we'll get into later. But I just think there's a bit of a slap in the face.
Not give a fuck.
I've got notes, Dave. All right, I've written down the number of transgressions that I basically find.
They basically justify it by saying that, but we're saving the world, so it's okay.
I don't have time for it, Joe. We will address it.
Well, here's a question. We'll touch on it later, I'm sure. Why don't they go back in time and try and stop the extinction of the whales?
We don't have time.
Why is that not what they're doing?
Let's hold the time travel stuff. It's a good question, but let's hold.
You're right, Sam. It's such a small part of the movie. Let's not talk about it.
No. Let's talk about it. But I think
it's coming up, Dave. So
we need to build up.
Mentalize it.
Yeah. There's a few more elements that we should talk about, and
can we talk about the suicidal woman who has nothing to live for, please?
Let's talk about Gillian, played by Catherine Hicks. Now, firstly, performance-wise, love this performance. She is she's going for it, and she's spunky, and she's full of fun. But it's as you suggest, Dave,
downing a bottle of paracetamol or flinging herself in the ocean.
She does not seem stable.
At the end of this day, if she had not met Kirk, isn't somebody who is so willing to go to the future because she has so little in her life that these two whales are the only thing she has to live for, so she has to go to the future. Is
I do think she's a good character though. She's well written in the bits that that the film shows us. I totally agree that there's a heck of a lot going on behind the scenes that we're never really shown. We have to kind of interpret ourselves. But her being really invested in looking after these whales, the bit when she slaps the other guy who moved the whales on
without telling her,
without telling, that's.
I don't know. I kind of think that was coming, Sam. This woman is a marine biologist, a clever woman who knows what she's about, is very passionate at what she's about, and she's giving fucking tours of this aquarium.
Yeah, I think she does that because
there's not a lot of job satisfaction there, Sam. I feel like maybe they're like, she's a woman. It's 1986.
I mean, what I will say is it's the 80s, right? Considering that America has had a period of serial killers, Ted Bundy, the Zodiac killer, all that there, and she's like, "Hey,
this woman from this,
two random dudes I just met, and one of them was just swimming with whales. Hop in. Let's
I
see where the road takes us."
My headcanon is this woman just needs something to make her feel alive.
Look, maybe she's hoping that they do grab the tire iron. Just
if they do grab a tire iron and kill me, at least it'll all be over. And if they don't, oh boy, maybe I'll feel alive. I drink myself to sleep when I get home.
The first thing I thought, though, and this is really bad on my part, and I do admit it up front, but when she said, "I've got a tire iron," I was like, "It's America. They have guns, so I don't brag about a tire iron."
Or phasers. Maybe.
They have phasers.
What?
Set to stun.
Again, headcanon. I kind of read this as her sensing that there's something different about these two because they're from the future, because there's something about them that she can't put her finger on, and she's not sure why, and that maybe she's kind of maybe in this world we're going in, the Star Trek that's gone back.
Sorry. She's not sure why. What's different about them. One of them literally just jumped into a tank with a whale and spent about 5 minutes with his hand on its head communicating with it. I'm pretty sure she knows exactly what's different about them.
But in Lethal Weapon 1, when Riggs has that bullet in the gun and he like thinks about killing himself every single day, and then he goes to work and he jumps off the building with that guy. That's this woman. Like she is on the edge. I can't unsee it. The way I thought of it, and I was she's making all these risky decisions.
I'm glad you said that, Dave, because I was thinking of like a softer way to propose that, and you just go straight in with bullet in the mouth. Cool, nice.
But the thing is, though, she's right. Like she is right about these guys.
Kill herself, Sam. That's extreme.
Don't, Sam. No.
She's right about Kirk and Spock being strange, and she's got a finger. Now you can suggest this is bad writing or not. The character, as written, as we see in the film, does get the fact that these guys are a bit unusual. And then when Spock says they're pregnant, one of them's pregnant, like she's like, okay, that's enough for me to be hooked. I do agree. The point beforehand when she's like, "Get in my car, I'll take you somewhere," is like maybe you could have had the line about the pregnancy beforehand so that she's kind of curious and invested. Maybe not after it.
Do you hear yourself when you speak? Oh, well, you know that whale's pregnant. Let's solve this, caper together. What's
because she's invested. I think that makes sense.
My fix for this is you play more on the whale thing. You play more on the like freedom for whales and protection for whales thing, and you have this woman be some sort of Greenpeace protester. You don't say Greenpeace, obviously, but you have her outside the aquarium, like holding a sign. She's part of a picket line, like saying "Stop the captivity of whales," and then you buy all of this crazy behavior from her and how she's immediately in on this plan with these lunatics because she's already a fucking lunatic.
Yeah, I like that. I think it makes much more sense, and you'd also get a better link to the obvious kind of like movie activism this film's going for in terms of we need to preserve natural wildlife and stuff. So yeah, I think you know what, I don't have a problem with her. I think she works well. I think it's a really spirited performance that keeps up with the rest of the movie, because the rest of the movie is pretty wild as well. Like we are on the Kirk level of zaniness throughout the rest of this film. We've got Scotty talking to a mouse, with like this Apple II product placement. We've got nuclear vessels.
Spiral goes west, backdoor pilot in this.
Yeah. We've got nuclear vessels all over the place. There's levels of zaniness in this film that I think are completely up there with her being a bit unhinged, and also really happy to just give up her entire life.
The plot lends itself to the believability of it. I think if this was taken more seriously, you would maybe we were asking all these questions, obviously, but genuinely, I don't have a big problem with this character. I just don't think about it. But the fact that it is quite light in tone means that you don't really think about all of this because it's a caper. Ross, you said when we were talking about it last night that it was a bit like a time heist, and it does have that feel to it. It's a bit more like chilled out than a we must save the world.
And we here at the Imaginary Podcast love a time heist.
We love a heist. Full stop. Oh, time.
Yeah. Let's do Heat. Next week.
I just want to jump in here. We've had a comment here from Corey Hart asking, "Are we circling back to the whale parliament soon?" Well, Corey, we weren't planning on it.
So what I was thinking some kind of like single vote system where all the whales.
Oh, are we talking like
I think it is a republic. I think what we do is we have
important
a single.
Thing, Sam, is this parliament on land and they're all in like half tanks reclining?
No, it's
under
like
the sea, like some kind of Atlantis thing.
It's like Little Mermaid. It's like Little Mermaid, and obviously
are they driving like their own like water tank around?
I think the whales are at war with some kind of land animal, maybe an elephant. Maybe you've got that kind of nice big hulking Titanic thing going on between the two.
I love Ross's mouth thing.
What am I hearing?
And then I think you've got some kind of maybe you can have first past the post, but I think it's got a single transferable vote system so that we get a lot
of rotten boroughs in the.
Can I just ask how elephants in Wales like go to war? Because elephants in the sea doesn't really go.
It's mostly in the shallows go, and to be honest, it's quite ineffective.
Joe,
that's why the stalemate developed.
Joe,
like
the whales,
trench warfare.
The elephants have boats and the whales have tanks. I mean, I don't know what's to really explain about that. To be honest, it seems pretty logical to me.
In conclusion, Corey, I hope we've answered your question.
Yes, there we go.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks for that, pal.
Yeah. But I feel like here we go. I feel like we're coming to the grand piece of this podcast, which is all the crazy shit that happens because time travel rules are really weird. That's what I'd like to talk about. Ross, I feel like I can see you like writing notes with a passion. I've just remembered
another piece of time. The time travel rule break. I'm just writing it down.
I'm gonna kick us off with just a little bit of light dabbling in changing the time space continuum, just a wee, and for a very good reason. McCoy in the hospital where Chekhov is getting worked on. There's this woman. There's this lovely old woman who's sat there looking very sore and miserable.
Hey, you don't know this woman isn't a child abuser or a murderer, Sam.
Maybe she is.
Let's not jump to conclusion. This woman could be literal Hitler.
Let's think about it then, because McCoy sees her and says, "What's up with you?" And she says, "My kidneys are shot. I'm having dialysis." And he's dialysis. This is an outrage. It's terrible. It's total BS. And so
what is this? The Dark Ages?
Yeah, she gives him.
To be fair, dialysis is pretty fucking savage.
It's horrible. Yeah, she gives him this pill, and then middle. As we're leaving the hospital, she's like, "The doctor gave me a pill, and I grew a new kidney." This is.
You know what my headcanon is? It was just like acid. She's tripping balls. She's like, "I grew a new kidney."
But it is a great.
Dave, for Sam's benefit, why don't you explain headcanon?
So headcanon, sorry, it's good that you bringing these things up, Ross, because we do slip into using our own sort of vocabulary here. Headcanon is a term that we use from the word canon, which refers to the official law in a property. So Star Wars is the one that I use it for most. It's when canon is like like Luke Skywalker's a Jedi. That's canon,
legit.
Yeah, exactly. Headcanon is when the movie doesn't bother explaining something, so you justify it in your own head. So it's a bit like, do you know what I mean? So if something happens in a movie and it's not explained, and you're like, well, how did he get that? It's when you kind of you make that connection yourself. Yeah. Well, maybe he did this or whatever. So my headcanon is this woman's high as fuck.
It's a vast movie. I'm very clear. Thanks, Ross, for clarifying.
I love this. I love this. I love Ross.
You don't need to be embarrassed, Sam. Okay, listen, we've all got gaps in our knowledge. Okay,
I appreciate it. But I do love this because it is a great example of okay, so what if that woman was meant to die and donate all of her kidneys and
kidneys didn't work, Sam,
her organs to someone else, and then that person died as well, but he was going to be the president of the Earth, which means that's not going to happen now, which means another person's going to take over who's going to cause a nuclear war and destroy everything.
You should have put a bullet in this woman's head the minute she talked to him.
just to be sure. Just to be sure.
Shoot for the face.
But again, that's the lightest example, I think, of fucking
Should we jump to the biggest one? Should we jump to the biggest one, which is obvious? That's obviously
the lightest.
Yeah,
go on, Joe. Go on.
I think we can all agree on the biggest one, where they give away a secret to the super strength aluminium.
Whoa! I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, first, Joe, tell us about it.
So basically, they agree to trade away this secret to super strength aluminium for question mark.
Transparent aluminum, isn't it? I think
transparent.
By the
aluminum,
way,
yes.
A Scotsman saying aluminum bothers me, even though I know he's a fake Scotsman. He's not
aluminium.
Scottish. Aluminium.
Yeah.
Aluminium. Yes, it's aluminium.
Anyway, go on.
So they give away the secret to this for question mark reasons, which, and the justification for the entire thing is Bones does say to him, "Why are you doing this? They're not supposed to have this technology." And Bones' response is, "How do you know he didn't invent it in 1986?"
Because in 1986 they hadn't invented it yet. Perhaps.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, that was explained about because the guy did say, "Oh, this will take years to develop." So that's okay. That's the least of my concerns, Sam. Because the thing is, Scotty's saying, well, how do you know he didn't invent it? You guys have fucking records and fucking archives on your ship. Maybe we want to check that before you go rewriting history.
Why don't you just ask Spock? He recognised Whale Song. Just because.
Ross
he probably knows who invented this thing.
Ross, what is your problem with this then?
What's my problem? I feel like you're baiting me here, Sam.
It's the casual, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the blatant, so what? So what?
So they get
guy.
I think.
So they get aluminium. Who cares? So they get aluminium.
So the fun thing could have been a really fun thing where it could have been another time paradox where this is actually the guy who invents it. You know what I mean? Like in the original timeline. So then you're thinking, oh, is this how he comes across it? And then you have that. Yeah, that would have been a fun paradox. But
I guess the reason they don't do that is, I don't know if they're trying to make it more relatable, because then we'd know that they didn't invent C3 wattage aluminium.
Well, they sort of they touch on it a bit, and in the trivia on a bit more, that basically he gives him the formula for it. So he tells him how the how transparent aluminium is made up, but he doesn't tell him how to make it.
Yeah, it's like the atomic. Yeah.
It's all. I think it's a deleted scene or whatever. But the idea being that this guy isn't going to go and like start making this stuff tomorrow. This guy's going to probably spend like a couple of decades figuring out how to make it. Yeah. So like, again, like a bit of headcanon and a bit like, so maybe Scotty's being flippant because he's a cunt, but like, he knows it's not invented for, you know, it doesn't become used for 25 years from now. But he thinks, well, this guy might figure it out in 25 years, but he might not, in which case it's fine.
Yeah. Any other time travel?
I must
say the biggest one. I've thought of the biggest one. Probably.
Easy guys, one at a time.
Before you gazump me, Joe.
Dave,
my
Joe,
biggest
Ross.
one, when you said about the Scotty thing, the biggest problem I have is like, cut this first half hour off in this film, obviously, but like use that time, go and get Chekhov's phaser back and his communicator. When he's running away from these like military guys, he just throws it at them, like. And they don't think, oh, we better go and get that piece of technology from 300 years in the future that's going to turn the US into the Nazis because they've got future technology to invade ray guns and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, but he managed to run through that completely unguarded door, like, you know, with a comedic timing, you know, only matched.
This is a real like sports almanac thing in this movie that they do not care about. Like, they want to go and get Chekhov, but they should get Chekhov and he go, Captain, I don't have my communicator. And Kirk goes, shit, we really can't leave that here because that's a big, you know, forget what Scotty's done. Like, oh, somebody might figure something out, or he might die of a heart attack because he eats 4 cheeseburgers. Or just hang a lantern on it
and just say, it's fine. They'll, you know, we'll swing back round.
Either way, but it could be like a fun, like, they need to infiltrate this base again. Like, that could be like a fun, like, mini heist within this heist. Because ultimately, the challenge of getting the whales isn't particularly... You know what I mean? There's not a lot of tension there that there could be. So let's have, like in this third act...
Reckless. Just...
It is reckless. Doc Brown, he would not be okay with any of this, you know?
I'm disgusted.
Yeah. So the biggest thing for me, though, in terms of time travel is the fact that they... Well, not so much time travel, more like the ecological impact of taking 2 whales from the 20th century and just dropping them in the ocean.
That actually is the biggest one when I think on it, is that, and also taking the woman with them.
Well, let's come back to Julian. Because I think
we'll come back to me when we come back to Julian. I have a hot take on that.
It's the fact that they've taken these whales, they're going to just chuck them in the sea. So they can communicate back to this
2 centuries after they're extinct. So you don't, like you said, Sam, you don't know what the environment is like for them or whether it can sustain them.
Yep.
Also, even though one of them's pregnant, they're going to die out again. This probe is coming back in another century.
Yeah. But these are things. I don't want to get into a pedant cast. I think we're deep into that already, to be honest. But I think let's not get too much deeper into pedant cast. But I do think there are like. So what's the solution here to this probe is destroying everything? It's like, can we destroy the probe? Like, there's maybe a point before we before we go 2 seconds there, before we go to time travel, before we go to, like going back to the future, back to the past, and fucking everything up in ways that we can't even imagine. We stopped the guy from getting run over. That guy turns into Hitler. There's all these things that could happen, and the film is not interested in any of that.
I think that some of it, Sam, is like the way I think about it. I don't see the whale's ecological impact being massive because enlightened, technologically advanced society, they can probably figure it out. In terms of whales surviving, again, enlightened, futuristic society with transport technology, they can clone these whales like that. They don't need, again, so I'm not so worried about that. And then it'll be like the 450th Amendment to the World Constitution. We can't kill all the whales because that probe will come back and fuck us up again, like becomes a thing, So I don't see that being an issue. In terms of the past, these whales were about to be killed by Finnish whalers, so taking them away doesn't actually change much apart from these whalers don't kill these whales.
That or Soviet radiation.
Yep. That or Soviet radiation. And Gillian, she's putting her head in the oven in the original timeline because these whales have gone a day early. So again, her going to the future, not really changing the timeline at all. If these guys operated like like a team, if they operated like the Avengers do in that last Marvel movie, efficiently and don't fuck things up, then suddenly, this is a really clean, we haven't fucked with the timeline thing.
Well, let's talk about Gillian then, because she's the one who is, again, I like the character, it all works well, and then she just blindly goes to the future. Like,
she has nothing, Sam. She has nothing.
But there isn't that moment. There isn't that moment in time travel movies where they have that freak out where they're like, there's talking robots and there's this thing, there's suicide booths and all these other things which were kind of like, she doesn't have that moment at all.
From this episode, we think that she would frequent, given Dave's description of her,
and she wouldn't be that would be a one and done kind of thing. That wouldn't be maybe
there's none of that.
She's doing it right.
There's none of that, and she's quite happy just to be in the future. Now it's fine, but I do feel like we could have had just a little bit more, as you say, Dave, a little bit more backstory to say that she's not really bothered by staying in the past, and also that she's.
Well, why would she, Sam? This movie has shown that there's no repercussions for fucking with the timeline. There's no comeuppance whatsoever. If she gets bored of the future, she can just go back to the 80s.
Yeah. Sling herself around the sun a couple of times. Sling herself around the sun a couple of times and she's there.
Sorry, Sam, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I think that's exactly right, Ross. I think it is a point of, there isn't really much, but it kind of goes to the general point of the movie of just not really being that interested in that type of question. We're here for the whales. We're here for Kirk and Spock doing their thing, and that's kind of enough, isn't it? Really,
Yeah, again, it's quite light and silly, and if you think about it, you're like, that doesn't make sense and that doesn't make sense. But if you don't, this is a totally fun watch that kind of makes, some sense. Her going to the future makes sense if you don't think about why she's doing it or why they're letting her do it or, the implications on the space-time continuum.
Yeah, I'll let you all come in on this, but I just want to set up as the kind of maybe the final part of our plot discussion. The thing at the end where he's demoted from admiral to captain and everyone's delighted.
Freeze frame.
It really is. So come on, any thoughts on that? Any thoughts?
I mean, Kirk's the happiest of them all. Kirk is happier than all of them.
Needs to be executed for his crimes. Ross, you've only watched this movie, but he is doing this shit. He is destabilizing governments. He is committing genocide. He is going back in time and getting his dick wet every week.
Apart from that one episode,
hang on, Joe. I want to jump in here because I've been sitting on this for a while now. I am utterly disgusted with the Federation's level of discipline. Holding Kirk to account, who, Dave, you stole my line, who went back in time and basically, because he had to get his dick wet, he brought a human from the past to the future. I've counted no less, and call it ped and cast if you want, Sam, I've counted no less than 6 acts of tampering with the time-space continuum. And it's literally... They went back in the past, they had a time heist, they had their cake and they fucked it. That's basically what this is. And now they come to the present and it's like, Kirk, we need to address some things. First of all,
also,
naughty.
He was already on trial.
Dave, I'm not done, goddammit.
No, Dave, quiet. Let Ross finish.
First of all, it says, Kirk, naughty boy. Right? Now you're only a captain, you rascal. First of all, send him to the Klingons, whatever he's done. Whether he's guilty or not. Whether he's guilty or not, send him to the Klingons, because by the sense, from all he's done so far, it's 2 birds, 1 stone. Get rid of Kirk, and now the Klingons are appeased. Great. I only know the Klingons are pissed off because that's the first 5 minutes of the movie. Second of all his crew needs to be, at the very minimum, dishonorable discharge. 6 separate counts of fucking with the past. God knows what they've done, and it's all like, oh, well, you saved us. Get out of here, you rascal. I am disgusted. The Federation needs to be disbanded. You know what? At the start of the movie, I was like, these Klingons, they're a bit harsh, aren't they? But I'm like, you know what? I'm on the Klingon side. I'm on the Klingon side.
Federation.
What?
Jesus.
So a couple of things.
The Federation.
Go on.
Defund the Federation.
Couple of things on Kirk. So he is, like every single episode of the original series, he pretty much breaks the Prime Directive at least once, apart from one episode, I think in season 2 or 3, where he goes onto a planet. And there is another captain who is breaking the Prime Directive. This time, he's done it to... he's basically given weapons, I think, to a colonization. They're going to be wiped out by this evil other colonization who are super powerful and are going to wipe them out. So he gives them futuristic weapons to help them defend themselves. And
he calls in America.
Loses his shit because
he wants to airlock this guy for doing what he does on a weekly basis.
He goes absolutely mental, gives him tons of rants about how they're there to protect the Prime Directive and protect other civilizations. We may not like the fact that it doesn't, sometimes it leads to them being killed, but we can't get involved and stuff. And it's like you do that every 30 minutes or so. I don't understand the problem.
So here's where I struggle. I don't get this level of sort of this foaming fandom for Kirk, and because you hear like through osmosis, like you said at the start of the episode, Dave. I have some knowledge of the Star Trek universe, and there's there's these things of Picard versus Kirk, who's better, and the level of love and adoration Kirk gets. I don't get it. He's a piece of shit, in my opinion. It's like this guy has gotten to a level of authority and he fucking flouts it, and that, and I'm getting way too invested in it because I'm pissed off now. I don't like him.
Yeah.
Kirk is your typical, like the fans love Kirk for many of the same reasons that like he always gets away with shit within the series. Like he is a big swinging dick. He is like America personified. He's going to go in. He's going to hammer punch some aliens. He's going to get the girl and he's going to save the day. And that's kind of his character there are moments of introspection and there are some times when they address that, but like in the movies, especially, they don't have time for it. So Kirk is the hero of the hour. Like he is the, there's no real world example of what Kirk is in the Federation.
It's also,
but like he is the chosen one. He is like, we fucking
the original.
Kirk.
That's what it is. It's also because he's the first. He's the original captain. He's the first Star Trek
captain.
There is something magnetic about Shatner's performance as Kirk, I think, as well. Like, there's just, but I agree with you, Ross. Like, this guy should be out of this, like, this military organization. Should be like, yeah, we're a military organization, Kirk. So we're kind of about orders and following orders and chains of command, not unilaterally committing attacks on other, like, empires. And
can I just say my second point that I was going to make was as well, and this is about the Federation and Ross's point on the Federation. So in DS9, they're at war with the Dominion, which is like this evil another evil power, and to try and win the war and turn it against the Dominion, they literally introduce some sort of infection into the Dominion shape-shifting race to literally wipe them all out. So they're okay to a literal genocide.
What all this represents, though, is that like we have these ideals, and that Star Trek, less so in the original series, but certainly as it progresses, and we get to something like Voyager, where they're just doing whatever they want because they're trying to survive. Like it's about the principles versus the reality, isn't it? And I think this is a good early example of where they're kind of not really thinking about that, but as the series progresses, I think they do understand that they need to acknowledge the fact that most of the time these characters don't really live up to the values of Starfleet because there's shit to be done, or because there's maybe a more legitimate reason. And that's kind of it kind of becomes like this is the human reality of what's happening. Whereas at this point, Ross, you're totally right. They're just not thinking about that. They don't care.
Kirk is a 24th century man solving problems in a very 21st century way, which is why viewers love it. And it's kind of like, but it is, like you said, Ross, it's very at odds of like in the universe. How does this guy have a job? Like, how did this guy get to this level of like of this organization without being drummed out for insubordination?
I've said it to you guys before, but I would just love to be on that sort of like that disciplinary committee when everyone's like, "Shall we demote him to captain?" What? How about we fucking actually punish this dickhead? I was like, did you hear the charges? Suspended, minimum. Investigation happening, then sacked. I don't give a shit. Demotion? Are you kidding me? Give him a fucking vacation.
Sorry, that's my bit. Is that he wants to be demoted to captain? That's like, and they know that.
He's for the trade union.
Demote him to a fucking toilet cleaner then.
These futuristic trade unions, Ross, they just get in the way, you know?
Yeah, everyone's cheering his demotion as well. Like, but, yeah, we know what's happening.
We have argued about Kirk for a long time now. So, do you think we've covered the plot here?
I think we have, and I think what like as a point of, I think we have kind of like nitpicked this a little bit, but despite all of this. For me, this is, as you said, Joe, this is the best. It's not the best. It's my favorite. It's my favorite Star Trek original series Star Trek movie because I think it's so much fun. And if you kind of like ignore all of this and just wrap it up in either your own personal headcanon or whatever else. But the question I have, especially for you, Ross, is like, does this make you want to watch more Star Trek? Does this intrigue you into the universe that they're presenting? Because This is like 1%. There is so much to bury into.
If the answer is yes, Ross, do not watch the original series. Don't start there.
So go on, Ross. Are you curious? Are you Star Trek curious?
Okay, so I mean, there's two questions you asked me. Am I curious and do I want to watch more? Curious, yes, because I love when a universe has such detail. I like learning all about that and the intricacies. I love it. You know, inconsistencies aside, because you know, Sam, that winds me up. But if this was something that came out, say, relatively recently, like in the late noughties or something like that, I could see myself, going back and watching it to get into it, But because you've had this series, and then you've had the sort of the movie series, Emma Picard, and now you have the recent movie series. I don't think it's something that I would get. It's piqued my interest, and like if you guys recommend, this is another good one, I'd probably watch that.
I'll take that. That's a win. I think we can get Ross round to
Final Frontier. Final Frontier, yeah.
Cosplaying.
I will say
as Picard.
I will say we should maybe think about doing First Contact at some point, because that's kind of this movie, but for the next generation. So for the
and I love those TNG movies, as bad as they are.
Yeah. But you're totally right, Ross. I mean, at this point, the original series is like 50 years old. Like, it's a very big ask, unless you're Joe, who had nothing to do for a year. It's a really big ask to like watch it. Even me, who has read 2 books about the economics of this made-up world, like even I sometimes struggle with the original series and think, what am I doing with my time?
For a cultural sort of phenomenon that has created its own language, like that alone, the level of dedication and that's why I said it. I didn't say figuratively. And the level of sort of commitment and adoration that something like that garners, then there's no denying there's something there. Yeah. However, I feel like I may have missed the bus somewhat on it.
And this movie really represents, I think, the cultural impact of Star Trek, because as much as it's about like the nerdy science stories, as much as it's about transporters and replicators and all this stuff, like Star Trek when it's good is about those like big moral questions and how do we resolve this problem and putting a lens back on humanity and saying this isn't right. I think as fun as this movie is, it also is trying to tell something. And I think some of the other films maybe lean a little bit too much on that. And this movie is like the perfect balance for me of just engaging, fun.
It is a good fun movie. Yeah.
It requires on you accepting a lot and just kind of going, yeah, you know what? Some of the premise is stupid, and the kind of the problems with it are kind of obvious. But like you say, there are plenty of the other Star Trek films that kind of go into similar sort of a thing. So Final Frontier, which is probably one of the worst movies I've watched, period. Not just the worst Star Trek movie.
It's so bad. It's dreadful. Bad.
But that's the kind of version of looking, does God exist? And in the end, it turns out no. Oh, not in Star Trek world anyway.
You've all touched on some really interesting stuff there, and I think this is the best execution of a Star Trek plot like they would do in the TV series, but on film, because I think that today, maybe the line is a bit blurrier, but in the 80s, and going back to the 60s when this was made, in the 80s, the line between cinema and television was very, very distinct. Yeah. And I think it must, only Star Trek in its fourth movie could get away with making essentially like an extended episode of TV, and then releasing it theatrically. And I think the execution of it is really, really good, and I think that's why it's fun to watch. There are problems, obviously, but like. This is a fun, relatively grown-up movie where, nothing is resolved by shooting people. Nobody gets killed. Like
no antagonist.
And there's no antagonist, and it's satisfying. And I think that's a real achievement for a film. I think that Star Trek used to do this every week in a TV show, but in a film, really the expectations are different. And do you know what I mean? You kind of like you expect a thrilling conclusion in a movie that maybe
it's well made. Here. It's well made movie making, isn't it? I think we can always appreciate that.
And like we said, this is the most fun Star Trek movie, and like there's maybe I think Wrath of Khan's the best Star Trek movie, period. And this is like this is second, and it's certainly the more fun of the two.
Cool. They just go for it, and you've got. I
might check out Wrath of Khan then. So there's
Ross,
really good. Ross.
You need to watch it in order.
Even just from
pass.
You can't just jump in because you're not going to understand. But also don't watch the first one because that's really shit.
Hang about. You can't just jump in. But Ross, watch Star Trek 4.
but let's not forget, listener, why we're here. Why we are watching this film is because Ross made us watch the 4-hour director's cut of Justice League. So this was on Retribution. However, because he kind of enjoyed it, I'm not sure that counts. I think we need to find something.
That's on you. That's on you, Sam. You can't.
I think no. I think we need
that's on you.
We need to plunge new depths.
What we should remember is the fact that the last movie I made us watch was Encino Man, and I have carte blanche to choose a movie in reparations for Justice League.
Well,
you better strap in, guys.
A couple of things to bring up. Number one, that wasn't a deal. Me and Sam struck a deal. You weren't part of that.
I was.
Number two,
Joe, refer to the messages.
Don't
I'm
going to side deals, Dave.
I'm pretty sure Ross said you weren't, Dave. To be honest,
I'm pretty sure I said I was.
Anyway, number two.
Go on, Joe. Go on, Ross. Last point.
I was just going to say that I think it's indicative when the movie started the other night and Amy was watching with me and she's like, is this because did Sam pick this? I went, yeah. She goes, God, he must have really hated Justice League.
And that is why we podcast, because we hate movies and we want
each other.
Like Joe going to say, I want to bring up two final points and then you know that's my final thoughts. One, just on the whaling content. God, that was graphic, and they didn't hold back on that. And that's not a complaint, but I think it's to be commended really, because I think Sam or Dave, you guys touched on it earlier, where it's a real genuine message, about whaling and the atrocities that causes. But gosh, even that informational video in the museum, you do see some stuff there, and it's you would never get that in a modern movie now. Even if they're trying to convey the same message, you would not see that. And again, that's I'm commending that, not criticizing it. The second thing is, at the start of this episode, I said, Sam, to you that I have a bone to pick with you, and I also think I need to give you credit where credit's due, because I was making notes throughout the thing, and I was like, Sam is overlooking or giving carte blanche excuses to a lot of the inconsistencies here. And I was like, but I was like, oh, well, it's because he watched it when he was young. He has that sort of nostalgia. And I have to say, I get that, because, we've done movies where we watched Blade or, Demolition Man. And you guys point out glaring sort of well, that's just action movies, guys. You can't take that for what it's worth.
That's the rules.
Yeah. Accept it. Move on. So that's what I'm saying. So fair, credit where credit's due.
So you're saying I'm right and I'm correct.
No.
Let me be clear, Sam. You are a piece of
thanks,
shit.
guys. That's the end of the episode. This has been really fun. I could talk about Star Trek for the rest of time. And
you certainly could, Sam. And you're going to for a few more minutes, because I have some trivia I said I was going to get to.
Oh, Christ, who cares? Come on.
I care.
Trivia.
And just because you were an hour late to the podcast does not mean you can usher us out because you're tired.
How about...
He literally can. He literally can.
I'll keep going.
Guys, how about we end the episode, and then Dave's trivia, that's your bonus features for after the episode. How about that?
There we go. So if you're listening to us,
if you want to stick around
on the podcast, then you know what, we have more content to share. That it's free. We're not even putting it by Patreon, which doesn't exist. You can search us on Imaginary Podcast on YouTube now, which is amazing, and you get to see our faces while you listen, which is I think less amazing.
Sons of guns.
On balance, probably, yeah. But this has been fun. I love talking about Star Trek. It's one of those things I could do forever, but not maybe as long as Dave wants to.
If you say so. Again, I feel like you're rushing us through this because you've been drinking all evening, but that's just me.
I'll keep going. Right, go on, Dave. If you want to do it, go for it.
No, you've ruined the moment, Sam. Let's get out of here and let's let the listeners/viewers get back to whatever they were doing.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.
See you, folks.
Bye.
Wow.
This is the end.
I did not think that the spin-off podcast would be me and Joe after Dave and Sam have their their public spat breakup.
Ross, that was all you. That wasn't me at all. You're the one who took in there and said it could be after show. Well, that wasn't me at all, so I wouldn't worry about it.
I do feel like Sam
Ross was mediating.
Absolutely steamrolled us to get us through that. Again, I know it's 10:30. It's only 10:30 because you were 45 minutes late.
I'm absolutely nothing. I think we've been talking around circles for the last 15 minutes. So I think we're maybe...
Yeah, so how dare I bring up an entirely new point and say...
Well, let's go for it. Let's do it. I'll add it to
No. You've ruined it, Sam.
No, we're still live, Dave. This is it now. We're in the after show.
Nobody's interested in my trivia at this point.
Tell us, please.
I'm interested. Go for it.
No, you're not.
I'm kind of interested.
I'll edit back in, Dave.
You're all fakers. You're all fakers.
I'll edit it back in. It'll be fine. No one will even hear your tantrum because I'll cut it out. So it'll be fine.
You're on this because this is live. So if they do
it's live on the air right now.
They're hearing Dave throwing his toys out of the pram.
For the tens of people who will watch this, yeah.
Tens.
Trivia.
Single digits. Trivia.
No. Last chance. Going. Ross, so what do we do then? Do we make Ross watch
Dave
slow motion picture?
Corey wants trivia. I'm not even joking. He's commented.
No, I know Corey, and he doesn't want trivia, and it's Corey, not Corey, by the way. It's someone Sam knows.
It doesn't okay. We'll just give us the trivia then, Dave.
Christ! What were you going to say, Sam?
I was going to say which movie should we make Ross watch next? Because I think slow motion picture is going to destroy his brain.
I don't want to have to rewatch that myself, so
It's a crap film.
Sorry, Corey. Dave is not in the mood for trivia, but let's get back to it. What do you mean make right? I did your movie, Sam. I did Star. I did. I nearly said Star Wars.
No,
there.
actually, genuinely, taking off the edge. I think if you're Star Trek curious, there is probably some movies to watch. If you've seen the TNG ones, you should maybe watch more of them. I'm just talking about you expanding your cultural horizons. Yeah,
I did that.
Or
expanded.
Maybe what about TNG? No, because the first 3 seasons of that is shit. What about Voyager?
DS9.
DS9 is a bit heavy.
Season 4, DS9 gets good, but yeah.
You're fine, Ross. You're fine.
What about Picard? No, that was shit. What about Discovery? No, that was shit. So there's a lot of shit.
Animated series. That's the way to go.
There it is.
Right,
Lower Decks is also shit, by the way. It's all shit.
Except when it's not, in which case it's fucking amazing.
That's really
don't watch the animated
the best
series.
of times. Let me be clear on this. I'm not watching any of it because you just reeled through shit, terrible shit. This is shit, but it's also good if you watch the right ones. But shit.
The animated series is not good at any point. Let's be clear on that one.
You should watch. We should maybe do that at some point with Ross because you're an animation head, Ross, and there's a lot to fucking hate in that. There's so much to hate. It's honestly maybe the worst thing I've ever seen, animated or no.
The animation is so
I have
poor.
too much hate in me already, Dave. I'm like, yes, I can spew vitriol and venom.
You.
It's one of those. It's funny because as much as like Star Trek is so easy to take the piss out of. Like there's so many. Yeah, because it is. But because like there's consistency flaws. There's just like bad storytelling. However, I don't think there's a show that like is as engaging and exciting and boring at the same time. Like that's the point of it, is that it's not about big action battles. Some of the best episodes of Star Trek, like some of the Voyager ones, is when they've got some disease on board and how do we eradicate this disease? Or there's the Tuvix one where 2 people get melded together in the transporter and the captain has to decide whether or not they unmeld them to make them back to who they were, or do they keep this brand new person who's a merging of them both, but it's completely a unique person.
Like I said, Sam, it's like the moral questions. Simple. This film,
it's not because this Tuvix, this guy there is an individual person who has his own agency, and they give him freedoms around the ship and everything. Like there's
not
all these
moral unmeld done.
Bullet in the head.
Maybe it's the lack of moral.
Griffith on deck. Shit's
maybe it's the lack
of
here. Moral inconsistency that.
There's loads of moral inconsistency, but like that's where Star Trek excels. Is where like it's the thinking episodes where you get to watch them like have a moral question. And the reason Star Trek is refreshing is because it's quite often not like a big gunfight, which is good. And I'm not saying doesn't have its place. Absolutely, it does. But sometimes it's nice to have a show that isn't about like, let's just have a big fight to resolve it. You know?
Can I take that conversation in a slightly different tangent and let me pose this question to you guys? Because then there's a moral question.
I'm listening.
Yes, I quite like it. So in these, these teleporters, the thing that melded these people, in these transporters, whatever they're called, do they? I want to make sure I pose this question correctly. Are they like transporting them somehow? Because obviously that's the name. Or are they breaking them down, making a copy of them, and then recreate it? Recreate like a fax machine essentially. It's not the original
one.
Yeah,
it's the second one. Yeah.
Why on earth would you ever go on a transporter then? Why?
Ross,
oh no! Don't worry, Ross.
They also malfunction all the time.
At least once a season.
There's an episode of TNG with this guy who gets nicknamed Broccoli, who's called Barclay, and he has this episode where he is petrified of transporters, and they all stand there and tell him, how nothing ever goes wrong on transporters. There's never been any transport accidents. You have an accident on a transporter about every 2 episodes, so don't go fucking telling him that there's never any accidents. There absolutely is.
We'll circle back to that. But even when they're working as intended, you're killing yourself. You are not you.
Yeah. But let's not forget that the real reason they exist is because it's fucking cheaper than having to have a spaceship like shot down to a planet every time.
And quicker.
Yeah.
Oh, how do we get onto this planet? Transporters, shoot it.
It's insane, Ross.
You don't join the Federation. What? Honestly, like, wrap your head around that. You are not. It's not you coming at the other end. You're dead.
Ross,
You're dead.
Ross, hear me here. There's an episode of TNG. Again, spoilers for that show that came out 40 years ago. In TNG, there's an episode where one of the main characters, they go back to this starbase that's been sealed inside something or other, guff, and they find a clone of one of their officers who has been living there for 5 years on this
Not just
station,
a clone
right?
of one of their officers.
And
Dave.
basically,
Hold on.
what happened was hear me out.
It's the second most important character in the show.
Yeah, but so what happened was they beamed this guy out with the transporter. Something went wrong, and basically one signal went to the transporter, and Riker was remade on the ship, and he went away after this accident. And one of them rebounded off the thing that sealed the station in, and ended up back in the station. So one Riker, and this isn't like it's this prestige moment. Oh, which one's the real one? I don't know. I guess the one who doesn't kill the other one first. In this, they then have to set up that there are 2 Rikers now in the world that are the exact same person who
This
diverged
guy has
6
his
years
own
ago.
life. He has his own fucking he carries on being in Starfleet.
He gets a commission in Starfleet.
So the character in TNG, the main one, is called William T. Riker. The copy, the clone, then gets another copy in Starfleet, and decides to go with the middle name, so he becomes Thomas Riker.
But how do they
the T
decide
stands for.
that? How do they decide which one of them is going to keep the name?
Because they have the conversation at the end of the episode, and the one that's William Riker doesn't like the name Thomas.
This is the thing, though. But wouldn't each of them, like, if that's the mirror conversation, wouldn't each of them be like, okay, and at the same time they go, I'll be William, you be Thomas. No, you be Thomas. No, you be William.
I'll be honest. If I had a clone, I'd be like, I better take this clone out before he takes me out, because I'd be thinking he must be thinking the same thing. So I better take him out before he takes me out.
Sort of mark, unless he's got some sort of like 2, like branded into
like
his
in
neck or
like
something.
in the 6th Day, that Arnie film, like with the eyelids.
Or like in Red Dwarf, they could put like a H on his head,
Yeah, hologram. Yeah, but it's the same principle in the Tuvix episode of Voyager, where it's like, fucking these just stop. Like, don't use these things. Why are you using them so casually? I mean,
are we going to get onto the holodecks as well? Because that's another whole other issue.
How the holodecks are used for anything but depraved sexual acts, I can't even.
Do you know what a holodeck is, Russ?
Yep.
So the holodecks are shit.
Somebody's job on that ship is wiping jizz off the inside of that holodeck, and that is a full-time, several people on shift rotation job.
The real purpose
should be Kirk's job.
Is that they've got
demoted to cleaning the holodecks. I'd rather die.
Give me to the Klingons.
The real purpose is like, shit. We've got loads of Nazi uniforms. What are we going to do? Oh, we'll just have a holodeck episode. It'll be fine. Some of my favourite episodes of Star Trek, though, holodecks.
We've run out of money at the end of a season. Like, can we
Gangsters,
borrow
Nazis,
some Robin Hood outfits?
Robin Hood.
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes.
The Robin
There's a
Hood
lot of
one
Nazis.
isn't
There's
holodeck,
a lot
though.
of Nazis in Star Trek. Like, loads more than you would think, Ross.
Yeah, the Robin Hood isn't...
for a TV show set
TV show
in the 23rd
set
century.
years in the future.
The Robin Hood one isn't the holodeck, though. That's Q. Q sent them.
No, yeah. Q's the other, like, well,
no.
the government machine.
Ross, Joe, there's still the principle of we've got loads of Robin Hood costumes.
Cost?
Don't we all want to see
Nothing.
Picard as Robin Hood?
Yeah, Data is he Friar Tuck?
I think. I think.
I can show you the world. All the stuff that you can imagine.
But do you know what, though? Like you're saying, Sam, it's kind of all the really shit, tropey, like, all the things that people make fun of Star Trek for are the things that if you watch it, that's what you love, is like, because you're in it's a bit like Stockholm Syndrome, because you're like because you're there, because you know what's going on, you're kind of on board for it.
I'm sorry, and I hate to bring it back to it, but I just cannot get past, like, one of the key pieces of, equipment used kills you repeatedly, and I'm trying to.
It's the prestige machine, Ross, but they're using it all the time.
Like recruitment ads will start with join Starfleet today.
You can drive, Ross, can't you? You can drive. Tens of thousands of people a year are killed by cars, yet it's more convenient. So fuck it. That's the same principle.
But at least I know I'm the one dying, and then I'm not. What? And then someone who looks exactly like me gets in the car tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. It's got. I think it's got like a success rate of like 98 point whatever it is.
It is, but you are right, Ross, and it is like the reason that it destroys you and rebuilds you instead of it just magically moving you is because they have these episodes where it malfunctions. Like, oh, we've lost them. Oh, they're stuck in the buffer pattern. Lots of made up words.
Yeah.
But the reason it's that is so that they can explain it. But you are right. It's like this thing destroys me.
But they also store like versions of their DNA as well. So if they do lose them, they can recreate them.
What about the episode of Voyager where 7 of 9 is practicing having social... She's a Borg whose transition is a human, who's practicing having social interactions with everyone in the crew, and she has a copy of everyone in the crew, and then she falls in love with one of the crew members who's a hologram.
I can one up you there, Sam. What about when Barclay is having sexcapades with the ship's counselor in the holodeck, and nobody's aware of it, and it's like, there's a consent issue there where you've created all of your crew members on the ship so that you can beat up your sexual rivals and have sex with a woman you've got a crush on.
You know when you guys went through all the series there, like shit, rapey. You didn't mention rapey.
There's a lot of rapey. There's a lot of consent issues throughout.
Riker and his sex trombone. Don't forget Riker and his sex trombone.
TV from the 90s. What do you expect?
There's an episode where Riker gets an alien STD and it nearly destroys the ship.
I think on that
Ross, the place they all go to vacation is called Riser, and it's a sex planet. So they all go to this sex planet for vacation, and there are so many episodes about the sex planet.
Follow us on Twitter, subscribe and like.
Subscribe and like. So if
you don't have to like, that's fine.
Yeah, subscribe and move on. If you are, however, watching some point in the future, don't forget we're a podcast, and you can have a much more cogent version of this on our podcast.
All this
feed.
after show, all this 20 minutes, gone.
No, nothing there, nothing at all. In fact, there's no reason to watch it in any way. Yeah. So search for us for Imaginary Movie Podcast, and I think at the end of this episode, I'm very happy to move on to something new, something fresh, and probably another Star Trek movie, to be honest, if we can convince Ross.
God, I'm depressed.
Bye, guys. We'll see you later. Thanks a lot.